The rain had stopped by the time the group reached the base of the mountain. A pale mist hung low, curling between the trees like silent guardians of the path ahead. The air was cold, unnervingly still, as though the forest itself was holding its breath, waiting for their next move. Ethan adjusted the strap of his backpack and glanced at the others. "So this is it," he said, a grin playing at his lips. "The infamous Himuro Mansion. Are we ready for this?" Hannah didn't answer. Right away, she stood slightly apart, her gaze fixed on the winding trail that led higher into the darkness of the mountain. As the only Japanese member of the group, she had heard more than enough stories about the place whispers of rituals, blood sacrifices, and restless spirits that never left. She hugged her jacket tighter around her. "We should remember," she finally said, her voice quiet, "that this place is not just a ruin. It's cursed." Bella, ever the skeptic, let out a sharp laugh. "Cursed? Come on, Hannah. Every abandoned house in the world comes with ghost stories. That's what makes them interesting." Her British accent carried a note of mockery, though her eyes flickered uneasily toward the trees. David, the Canadian, adjusted his camera, the red light blinking. "Well, cursed or not, tonight's footage will make a killer video. Urban legends, haunted mansions. This is exactly what people want to see." "Exactly," Liam chimed in with his thick Australian drawl, slapping David on the shoulder. "We're not here to run away from scary stories. We're here to prove them wrong. Right, Ethan?" Ethan grinned. He thrived on adrenaline, on pushing boundaries. "Right. Let's make history." The five of them began their climb, boots crunching against damp leaves and stones. The forest thickened as they ascended, branches clawing overhead, blotting out the last of the evening light. The deeper they went, the colder the air became, until their breath rose in pale clouds before them. It was Hannah who noticed it first, the silence. No birds, no rustling of nocturnal animals, nothing. Only the sound of their own steps and the occasional snap of twigs beneath their feet. She slowed her pace, her pulse quickening. The stories spoke of this, the stillness that warned travelers they had crossed into Himuro's domain. By the time they reached the clearing, night had already settled across the mountain. Before them stood the mansion. Its silhouette loomed like a corpse against the moonlight. The wooden beams were rotted, the roof sagged under years of decay, and the gate, once grand and imposing, now leaned to one side, half buried under vines. Yet even in ruin, there was a strange authority to it, as if the house itself still guarded its secrets fiercely. No one spoke for a long moment. The camera hummed softly in David's hands, capturing every detail: the warped timbers, the blackened windows, the faint etching of kanji on the half-collapsed gate. Finally, Ethan broke the silence. "Well," he said, his voice lighter than he felt, "shall we?" They crossed the threshold together, stepping into the shadow of Himuro Mansion. As the gate creaked shut behind them, Hannah whispered something under her breath. Words none of the others understood, a prayer half forgotten. And with that, the curse of Himuro began to stir. The air inside the compound felt heavier, as if the act of passing through the gate had sealed them away from the outside world. The silence deepened, pressing against their ears like invisible hands. Even David, who had been eager to document everything, lowered his camera for a moment to take in the sheer weight of the atmosphere. The gate groaned behind them, the rusted hinges shrieking in protest as the wind pushed against it. Then, without warning, it slammed shut. The metallic clang echoed through the clearing like a gunshot. Everyone froze. Bella's eyes widened. "That wasn't the wind," she whispered. Ethan forced a chuckle, though it sounded thin in the stillness. "Old gate. Metal expands, contracts, you know the drill." But Hannah's expression darkened. She had seen the symbols carved faintly into the wood of the gate protective wards, long faded by time. They weren't meant to keep people out. They were meant to keep something in. "Let's just keep moving," Liam suggested, shifting uncomfortably. "We didn't climb all this way to chicken out because of a door." The path ahead led them closer to the mansion itself. The closer they drew, the stronger the smell of damp earth and rot became. Weeds had taken root in the cracks of the courtyard stones, and moss crept up the once polished lanterns lining the path. David raised his camera again, narrating in a hushed tone. "Here we are, August 21st, 11:47 p.m. We've officially entered the grounds of Himuro Mansion. The gate behind us closed on its own, which, I've got to admit, is pretty damn creepy." His attempt at keeping things light didn't mask the tremor in his voice. They approached the entrance. The sliding doors were splintered, one panel hanging loose on its track. A strange, metallic stain spread across the wood near the base, brown, but unmistakably once red. Bella leaned closer, frowning. "Is that blood?" Liam scoffed, but he didn't step any nearer. "Probably rust. This whole place is falling apart." Hannah bent down, her fingers hovering just above the stain. She didn't touch it, but she knew this was no rust. Her grandmother had told her the stories of the rope ritual, of the blood spilled in this house to bind the family's curse. Suddenly, the wind picked up. The door slid open on its own, screeching along the old wooden frame. Beyond lay a hallway swallowed in shadow, the darkness thick as ink. Ethan stepped forward, his flashlight cutting a narrow beam through the gloom. "Showtime," he said, trying to sound braver than he felt. The others followed reluctantly, the soles of their shoes echoing against the warped floorboards. Each step seemed louder than the last, as though the house was amplifying their intrusion. Behind them, the gate rattled once more in the distance. It sounded less like the wind this time, and more like laughter. The hallway stretched on endlessly, the beam of Ethan's flashlight cutting only a thin slice of clarity through the suffocating dark. The wooden floor groaned under their steps, and every corner seemed to hide something waiting to breathe, waiting to move. The group stayed close together. The air inside was damp, tinged with mold and the faint metallic temps of old blood. The walls, once painted with delicate floral patterns, were stained with age and grime. The silence inside was worse than the forests. Silence it was a silence that felt alive. David's camera whirred softly as he filmed. His lens caught faded scrolls still clinging to the walls, torn family portraits whose eyes seemed to follow their movements. "This is incredible," he whispered, almost reverently. "It's like the place was abandoned overnight." They turned a corner, and Bella stopped abruptly, her breath caught in her throat. "Oh my God." The beam of the flashlight fell on a smear across the wall, a long, uneven streak, thick and dark, running from the floor up toward the ceiling. At first it could have been mistaken for paint, but the texture was unmistakable. Blood. The others stared, transfixed. The streak wasn't alone. Dozens more marks ran along the walls of the corridor, some small, like handprints dragged downward, others wide, as though whole bodies had been pressed against the surface. Ethan swallowed hard. Jesus, what the hell happened here? Hannah's lips trembled, her face pale. She recognized the markings. Her grandmother's words echoed in her mind, the tales of the strangling ritual. Victims tied with ropes, their blood soaking the walls as they screamed, begging for release. Bella shook her head violently, as if trying to dispel the thought. No, no, this has to be fake. Someone must have staged this place to keep the legend alive. But the smell in the air betrayed the truth. It wasn't fake. The coppery scent was still faintly there, lingering after decades, as though the house itself refused to let the memory go. Liam forced a laugh, though his voice cracked. Blood doesn't stay on walls for 50 years. Bella, this doesn't make sense. The corridor seemed to narrow around them, the walls leaning in. David's camera flickered, static bleeding across the screen. He slapped the side of it, but the image remained distorted, faces of his friends warping in the glow of the LCD screen. For a brief second, a pale figure appeared in the background of the footage, tall, head bowed, ropes dangling from its arms. But when he lowered the camera to look with his own eyes, the hallway was empty. Guys, David's voice shook. We need to keep moving. They pressed forward, the blood-stained walls watching silently as they passed. Every mark, every handprint seemed fresher than the last, as if the house was feeding on their fear, painting its story anew with their presence. At the end of the hall, a set of stairs descended into darkness. The wood was slick, damp, almost breathing. Ethan raised his light, his jaw tight. Downstairs, he said, that's where we'll find the real answers. No one answered. The only sound was the soft drip, drip, drip of something, unseen, hitting the floor behind them. When they turned to look, the wall they had just passed bore a new handprint, fresh, wet, red. The stairs groaned beneath their weight as the group descended. Each step seemed to drag them deeper, not just into the mansion, but into something older, something that had been waiting. The flashlight beams danced across the warped wood and damp stone, shadows twisting unnaturally along the walls. The air grew colder, sharper. Hannah shivered and clutched her arms. She knew this part of the mansion from the stories, the underground chambers where rituals had been performed centuries ago. She had hoped the legends were exaggerated, but as the damp smell thickened with something sour and metallic, she realized the stories had been merciful compared to the truth. At the bottom of the staircase, the group entered a large chamber. The walls were bare stone, darkened with stains. Ropes hung from the beams overhead, frayed but still intact. Swaying gently, though there was no draft, Bella's breath came out in a short gasp. What the hell is this place? David lifted his camera. The red light blinked against the ropes, illuminating the fibers. It's a ritual chamber, he muttered, awe and terror mingling in his voice. This must have been where it happened. Ethan raised his flashlight higher, the beam falling on the floor. The stone surface was etched with grooves, forming a circle. Surrounded by strange kanji symbols, dark patches filled the cracks, dried and hardened over decades. Blood. Liam stepped forward, squinting at the symbols. Rituals, sacrifices. You're kidding me, right? This looks staged like a movie set. No, Hannah whispered, her voice trembling. This is real. She pointed to the ropes above them. They called it the ritual of strangling. The family believed they had to sacrifice one of their daughters, binding her with ropes until her body tore apart. The blood would seal away the evil. Bella recoiled, shaking her head. That's insane. No one would. Her words caught in her throat as a sound rose from the chamber. A faint, strangled cry. It came from nowhere, yet everywhere at once. The ropes swayed violently, as if invisible hands were pulling at them. The group froze. David's camera shook in his hands. The screen flickered with static, then showed a brief image that none of them could mistake. A girl in a white kimono, her face pale and twisted in agony, ropes digging into her wrists, her arms pulled in opposite directions. Then she was gone. Ethan's flashlight flickered. For a moment, darkness swallowed them whole. When the beam returned, the ropes were no longer empty. They hung heavy with fresh stains, dark and glistening. Hannah stumbled back, her voice breaking. "We shouldn't be here. This place, it remembers." The cries grew louder, echoing through the chamber, the sound of suffocation, of tearing flesh, of desperate prayers unanswered. The floor beneath them seemed to pulse, as though the blood carved into its stones still lived, still beat like a heart. Ethan clenched his jaw. "We came here to find the truth," he said, though his own voice trembled. "Now we know, the legends, they're real." But as the ropes twisted overhead, coiling like serpents hungry for new victims, the group realized that the truth was not what they had come to find. It was what had found them. The chamber was alive with sound now, low whispers slithering through the air, the ropes swaying in unnatural rhythm, the walls seeming to pulse with every flicker of their flashlights. Bella clutched Ethan's arm. "We need to leave, now. This isn't fun anymore." Before Ethan could answer, David's camera jerked violently in his hands. The screen erupted with static, but beneath the noise, an image flickered, a pale woman's face, hollow eyes staring directly into the lens. Her mouth opened in a silent scream, and then the feed went black. David gasped, lowering the camera. "Did you see that? Did any of you?" He stopped mid-sentence. A drip of liquid fell onto his shoulder. Slowly, he reached up, his fingers brushing something warm. He pulled his hand away, staring at the crimson smear on his skin. Blood. The others lifted their eyes to the ceiling. One of the ropes above them was no longer empty. A body hung suspended, swaying gently in the darkness. Its features were hidden by matted hair, its arms bound tightly by thick ropes that cut into the flesh. Bella screamed. Liam cursed, stumbling backward, but David couldn't move. The camera trembled in his hands, the lens locked on the figure. No, this isn't real," he whispered. "It's a trick of the light." The head of the body twitched. Slowly, unnaturally, it lifted. The face was his own. David stumbled back, his voice breaking into a strangled cry. No. The ropes above snapped forward like whips, lashing. Out of the darkness, one coiled around David's arm, another around his neck. He dropped the camera as he was yanked upward, his scream echoing off the chamber walls. Ethan lunged forward, grabbing at him. David, but it was too late. The ropes tightened with impossible strength, pulling David's body upward. His neck twisted with a sickening crack. His scream cut short. The group froze in horror, their flashlights shaking as they illuminated his limp form, dangling in the rope's grip. His eyes bulged, lifeless, staring down at them as blood trickled down onto the ritual circle below. Hannah's voice was barely a whisper. "It's begun." The chamber grew colder, the whispers louder, the shadows deeper. The house had claimed its first victim, and none of them were leaving. They fled the chamber in a blind panic, the echo of David's last scream chasing them through the twisting hallways. The house seemed to shift with every step, doors leading to unfamiliar corridors, stairs that bent into angles that shouldn't exist. Ethan gripped the flashlight so hard his knuckles whitened. His mind replayed the sight of David's body, the sound of bones snapping, the way the ropes moved on their own. He forced the memory down, focusing only on survival. They finally stumbled into what looked like an old sitting room. Tatami mats lay rotting on the floor, the paper screens torn and stained. In the corner sat a broken shrine, the offerings long decayed, a small porcelain mask staring blankly up at them from the rubble. Bella collapsed against the wall, trembling. "We should never have come here. We should have listened." Her voice cracked, hysteria bubbling beneath her words. Liam paced the room like a caged animal. "We need to find another way out. There's gotta be a back door, a window, something." He grabbed one of the sliding panels and yanked it open, only to find another dark hallway waiting, endless and unfamiliar. He slammed it shut, cursing. Hannah sat near the shrine, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She whispered to herself in Japanese, a prayer her grandmother had taught her. But even as she prayed, she knew the house had already chosen them. The ritual had begun again. That night, they didn't dare move further. Exhaustion forced them to stay in the sitting room, though none of them truly slept. They sat in silence, the weight of David's absence crushing them, each jumpy at the slightest creak of the old mansion. Then, as the hours crawled by, the sound began, soft at first, faint, almost mistaken for the wind. A low, muffled sobbing. Bella sat upright, her eyes wide. "Do you hear that?" The sound grew louder, filling the room. It was the weeping of a woman, broken and endless, echoing through the wooden beams of the house. It seemed to seep from the walls themselves, surrounding them. Ethan raised his flashlight, scanning the corners. Where is it coming from? The sobbing shifted suddenly, sharp as a blade. It became a scream, a long, piercing wail that cut through the night, vibrating in their bones. The paper screens shook, dust falling from the ceiling. Liam covered his ears, shouting, "Make it stop, make it stop." And then, just as suddenly, silence. The room fell deathly quiet. Hannah's face was pale, her lips trembling. "It's her," she whispered. "The woman sacrificed in the strangling ritual. They say her spirit never rests. Every night, she cries for the life that was stolen." Bella shook her head, her voice breaking. "I can't do this. I can't." A single sob echoed right behind her ear. Bella screamed, jerking away from the wall. The others shone their flashlights in her direction, but nothing was there. Only the mask from the broken shrine lying on the floor, now cracked straight down the middle. The mansion was awake, and it was watching. The sobbing had stopped, but its echo lingered in their minds. No one dared to speak of it as they left the sitting room, their flashlights trembling in unsteady hands. The mansion seemed darker now, heavier, as though it had drawn strength from their fear. Hannah walked at the front, her expression tense. She knew where the sound had been leading them, though she had hoped they would never reach it. The path twisted through corridors until they found themselves before another staircase, steep and narrow, descending into the earth. No one wanted to go down, but silence pressed at their backs, and the memory of David's death told them that staying still would be worse. Ethan nodded once, and they descended. The air grew colder with every step. When their lights touched the bottom, they saw stone, walls lined with rusted iron bars. It was not another hallway of the mansion. It was a dungeon. Cells stretched into the shadows, their doors half broken, their insides filled with decay. Scratches marred the stone marks of desperate fingernails, dragged across the surface long ago. Ropes lay scattered on the ground, stiff and darkened with stains that needed no explanation. Bella's hand shook as she covered her mouth. "This is where they kept them." Hannah nodded, her voice a whisper. "The chosen, locked away until..." The ritual. They moved slowly, their footsteps echoing in the oppressive silence. Their lights passed over skeletal remains, bound in ropes even in death, their faces twisted in permanent screams. The deeper they went, the more suffocating the air became. A low sound stirred in the darkness, chains rattling, faint and distant. None of them could tell whether it was real or only memory lingering in the stones. At the far end of the dungeon, they found a heavy wooden door. The beams were warped, splintered with age, but the marks of blood-stained ropes hung from the frame like a warning. No one wanted to open it, yet they knew the house was guiding them here. Ethan reached for the handle, his flashlight trembling. In his other hand, the cold would bit into his palm as he pushed. The door creaked open, revealing a chamber beyond vast, black and waiting. And with that, they stepped into the heart of Himuro Mansion. The heavy door groaned shut behind them, sealing the 4 survivors inside. Their flashlights swept across the chamber, beams trembling in the dark. It was vast, larger than any room they had seen. The floor bore the remnants of ritual markings, carved deep into the stone, still stained with blackened blood. Ropes hung from the ceiling in tangled clusters, swaying gently as though stirred by a breath they could not feel. Bella's voice cracked as she whispered, "This is it. This is where it happened." Hannah's face was pale. She could barely breathe. She had heard the stories all her life, but seeing the ritual chamber with her own eyes was like staring into a nightmare carved out of reality. The air thickened, cold, suffocating. Then, from the darkness, the sobbing returned. Louder now, closer. The sound of a woman weeping, her sorrow twisting into rage. The ropes stirred, slowly at first, then violently. They lashed downward, striking the floor, coiling like serpents searching for prey. The survivors backed away, but the chamber seemed to close in on them, shadows bending to trap them inside. Ethan tried to steady his voice. "Stay together, don't let it," he never finished. The ropes struck him, wrapping tight around his arms and chest. He fought, pulling desperately, but they tightened with unnatural force, dragging him toward the center of the ritual circle. His flashlight clattered to the floor, spinning beams of light across the walls. "Ethan!" Bella screamed, rushing forward, but another rope lashed out, coiling around her wrist. She shrieked as it yanked her back, slamming her against the wall. Liam swung a broken piece of wood at the ropes, striking wildly, but it was useless. The house wasn't just wood and stone anymore. It was alive, and it wanted them. Hannah fell to her knees, her voice trembling as she prayed. Her words were drowned by the cries in the chamber, the sound of a woman strangling, a chorus of victims screaming in unison. Then Ethan's body went still. His eyes opened wide, glassy and unblinking. His lips moved, but it was not his voice that came out. "You cannot break the ritual." The voice hissed, low and inhuman. "The blood must flow, the ropes must bind, the curse must live." Bella sobbed, shaking her head violently. "No, no, please." The ropes tightened around her, silencing her pleas. Liam's screams echoed as he was dragged into the shadows. Hannah stared at Ethan's possessed body, tears streaming down her face. She knew then that there was no escape, no breaking the curse. The mansion had chosen its vessels. The last thing she heard was the sound of the ropes pulling taut, the final cry of a woman echoing through the chamber, and then silence. When the police came days later, they found the mansion empty. No bodies, no cameras, no trace of the missing group. Only the house remained waiting, watching, hungering for the next to enter.
Thank you for following.